The morning sun was gentle when Rachel Morgan drove through the worn-out welcome sign of Whitestone, Texas, a place that hadn't changed much since she left as a teenager. It was the kind of small town where everyone knew each other's business, where news traveled faster than the wind, and secrets were impossible to keep. Except, perhaps, the kind Rachel carried. Her truck rattled over the dirt road, the back seats stacked with cardboard boxes and military duffels. The radio murmured static, and every few miles, her eyes flicked toward the rearview mirror, an old habit from years of convoy duty overseas. Even here, in this quiet stretch of farmland, her mind stayed alert, trained to spot danger, though she knew there was none. That instinct was something the Navy had burned deep into her soul. Rachel had spent 20 years as a Navy SEAL, a trailblazer long before the public even knew women were being quietly integrated into special operations. She had served in the harsh deserts of Afghanistan, hunted warlords across the Horn of Africa, and pulled her teammates out of ambushes no one was supposed to survive. She had medals more than she could count, but she kept them tucked away in a box that now sat at the bottom of one of those duffels, gathering dust. She wasn't here to be a hero. She was just tired. Whitestone was supposed to be a refuge, a place to breathe, to find a sliver of peace in a world that had never stopped spinning since the day she enlisted. Her father had passed away a few months earlier, leaving behind a small farmhouse on the outskirts of town and a lifetime of unspoken words. Coming home was bittersweet, but Rachel owed him that much. When she pulled into the gravel driveway, the air smelled like rain and pine. The old house leaned slightly to one side, its white paint peeling, but it was hers now. She killed the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the creak of the wind through the trees. The silence was deafening. No gunfire, no radio chatter, no orders shouted through combs. Just the sound of crickets and the distant moo of cattle. "Welcome home, Commander," she muttered to herself, with a half-smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The next few days passed quietly. Rachel unpacked, fixed the porch steps, and stopped by town to buy groceries. Whitestone was small, 2 diners, 1 grocery store, and a gas station that doubled as a gossip hub. The locals were friendly in that cautious, curious way small-town people often were toward newcomers, especially ones they didn't understand. The clerk at the store, an older woman with too much lipstick, eyed Rachel's cropped hair and plain t-shirt. "You just move here?" Rachel nodded. "Used to live here. A long time ago." "Ah," the woman said, scanning her items. "What brought you back?" "Family house," Rachel replied, keeping it simple. The woman nodded slowly, her eyes glancing toward the faded military tattoo on Rachel's forearm. "You serve?" Rachel's lips curved faintly. "A little." That was all she said, and all she ever planned to say. By the time Rachel walked back to her truck, she could already sense the murmurs beginning behind her. People here didn't mean harm, but curiosity could turn sharp in small places. That night, she drove to O'Malley's Diner, the local hangout for veterans, farmers, and teenagers looking for cheap burgers. Inside, laughter bounced off the wood-paneled walls. A few familiar faces looked up, squinting. "Well, I'll be damned," an old voice said. It was Carl Jenkins, her father's friend, and a Vietnam vet who now ran the town's Veterans Center. "Rachel Morgan? That you?" Rachel smiled and shook his hand. "Hey, Carl. It's been a while." Carl studied her, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Heard you joined the Navy. Never thought you'd stay gone that long." 20 years, she said softly. He whistled. "Guess the world out there kept you busy." "You could say that." Carl grinned. "You should stop by the center. We could use some help organizing the Veterans Day event. Lot of new faces these days." Rachel nodded. "I'll come by." As they talked, A group of younger men sitting at the counter glanced over. One of them, tall, cocky, probably late 20s, snickered and whispered something to his friends. Rachel didn't catch the words, but she recognized the tone. She'd heard it before every time someone underestimated her. When she finished her meal, the same young man turned around and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "So, lady, they say you were military? Navy, huh? What did you do? File paperwork?" His friends laughed. Rachel's eyes lifted slowly to meet his. For a second, something flickered in them, something cold, controlled, dangerous. Then she smiled faintly. Something like that. The young man grinned, mistaking her calm for weakness. "Well, next month's the Veterans Challenge. You should join. Might toughen you up." Carl shot the man a glare. "Watch your mouth, Eddie." Rachel stood, dropping a few bills on the counter. "Sure," she said quietly. "Maybe I will." As she walked out, the diner's laughter faded behind her. The men didn't know it yet, but they just challenged someone who had crawled through war zones they couldn't even imagine. The next morning, Rachel stood on her porch, sipping coffee as the sun rose over the fields. Her phone buzzed with a message from Carl. "Signed you up for the Veterans Challenge." "You sure you're up for it?" Rachel smirked slightly, typing back, "I've been through worse." Her routine settled into a rhythm: early morning runs along the dirt roads, afternoons volunteering at the Veterans Center, evenings spent fixing up the farmhouse. The more she worked, the more whispers she heard. Some were harmless curiosity, others doubt. "That woman claims she was in the SEALs? They don't even let women in, do they?" She ignored it. Let them talk. She'd been called worse things than a liar. At the Veterans Center, she helped organize care packages and wrote letters to soldiers overseas. The older vets respected her quiet presence, sensing something familiar in the way she carried herself. She never boasted, never told war stories, but there was an unmistakable authority in her voice when she spoke steady, calm, and commanding. One afternoon, Carl handed her a stack of registration forms. "You know," he said, "folks around here like you. But some don't believe the stories." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "What stories?" Carl shrugged. "That you were some kind of Navy hotshot. People don't know what to make of a woman like you." Rachel smiled. "That's all right. I'm not here to impress anyone." Carl chuckled. "You will, whether you mean to or not." That evening, Rachel sat on her porch, watching the horizon glow orange. She thought about her old team men who never made it home, brothers she'd buried in foreign soil. She remembered the cold sting of ocean spray during night operations, the sound of rotors slicing the air above enemy territory. Out there, she'd been Commander Morgan, respected, feared, and utterly alone. Here, she was just that quiet woman on the hill. And for the first time in years, that didn't bother her. Still, something restless stirred inside her. She'd lived her life under command, under discipline, under war. Now she was trying to learn what peace even meant. But peace, she realized, wasn't always silent. It had to be earned. The Veterans Challenge loomed ahead, and though she told herself it was just a local event, a part of her knew this was something more. A test, not of strength but of patience. She took another sip of coffee, eyes narrowing toward the distance. "All right," she whispered to herself. "Let's see what this town is made of." The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of laughter from down the road, the same men who'd mocked her. Rachel smiled faintly, not in anger, but in quiet anticipation. They had no idea who they were dealing with. And soon they would. Whitestone, Texas, had its rhythm slow, predictable, and proudly unchanged. Folks liked knowing who their neighbors were, what they did, and how they fit into the town's social puzzle. And Rachel Morgan, the quiet woman living on the edge of town, didn't fit anywhere. At first, people treated her politely enough smiles, in passing friendly waves. But it didn't take long before curiosity turned into chatter. "Did you hear? That Morgan girl says she was a SEAL," said one voice at the diner. "They don't let women in the SEALs," another replied. "She's probably just exaggerating. Well, she sure acts like she's hiding something." By the second week, Rachel's name was in every corner of conversation. On a Friday evening, she returned to O'Malley's Diner, her usual stop after volunteering. The place was busy, a soft haze of country music humming beneath the chatter. Carl Jenkins waved her over to his booth. "Got your name down for the Veterans Challenge," he said with a grin. Rachel smirked. "Guess that means I don't get to back out." "Wouldn't expect you to," Carl said, sipping his coffee. "You'll like it. It's rough, muddy, and full of overconfident kids who think they're invincible." Rachel chuckled softly. "My favorite kind." At the counter, the same group of young men sat laughing loudly. Eddie Brooks, the self-appointed leader, was the type every small town had. Big voice, bigger ego, and just enough charm to make people overlook his arrogance. He worked at the auto shop, raced trucks on weekends, and carried himself like a man who'd never been told no. He spotted Rachel and smirked. "Look who's back, the Navy superstar." His tone dripped with mockery. His buddies snickered. Rachel ignored him, focusing on her meal, but Eddie wasn't finished. "So, tell me, Commander, what do SEALs even do? Paint their nails underwater?" Carl glared from across the booth. "That's enough, Eddie." Eddie raised his hands, pretending innocence. "Just curious, old man. We just don't get celebrities like her around here." Rachel set her fork down slowly and looked at him. Her voice was calm, quiet, but the kind of quiet that carried weight. "You'd be surprised what SEALs do, and what they survive." The smirk on Eddie's face faltered for a split second. "Yeah? We'll see how tough you are at the challenge." Rachel's eyes didn't waver. "We will." After she left, the laughter returned, but this time it was thinner, uneasy. Something about her had unsettled them. The following morning, Rachel ran along the empty road outside town. The air was crisp, her boots hitting the dirt in a steady rhythm. Running had always been her therapy symbol, quiet, relentless. She remembered running like this during deployment, under the orange skies of Kandahar, the distant thump of mortar in the distance. Here, there were only birds. It should have felt peaceful, but part of her missed the chaos. She didn't miss war, but she missed purpose. Later that day, she drove into town for groceries. As she stepped out of her truck, she noticed Eddie and his friends leaning against their cars outside the shop, watching her. She nodded politely and walked past. "Hey, Commander," Eddie called out. "You training for the big mud run, or just doing your morning yoga?" Rachel paused, turned slightly, and smiled faintly. "You worried I'll beat you?" His friends hooted, and Eddie laughed. "Nah, just making sure you don't twist an ankle out there." Rachel didn't answer. She just kept walking. But something in the way she looked at him steady, almost surgical, made his laughter fade again. That weekend, she met with Carl and a few other veterans at the center to plan the upcoming event. The Veterans Challenge had become a big deal in Whitestone over the years, an obstacle course designed to raise money for wounded service members. It was part competition, part charity, part spectacle. "You'll be up against a lot of young guys," Carl warned. "They train all year for this." Rachel smiled. "So did I for 20. Carl chuckled. "That's what I like to hear." As they worked through logistics, one of the volunteers, a local police officer, walked in holding a flyer. "Carl, you seen this? The Brooks boys are talking trash again. They've been posting on social media about beating the SEAL lady." Carl sighed. Idiots. He handed Rachel the flyer. Rachel skimmed it. It was a meme Eddie and his friends posing in front of mud pits with the caption, "Watch us show the Navy Barbie how real men handle dirt." Rachel chuckled quietly. Creative. Carl frowned. You don't have to do this, you know. They're just trying to rile you up. Rachel folded the flyer and slipped it into her pocket. Carl, I've been shot at by people who actually meant it. I can handle internet cowboys. The days leading up to the event passed quickly. Rachel trained in silence morning runs, pull-ups on the barn beam, cold water plunges in the creek. Every movement had purpose. Every breath was discipline. Yet, even as she focused, she couldn't ignore the whispers when she walked through town. People pointed, whispered, "That's her," some out of admiration, others amusement. She'd been underestimated her entire career. She was used to it, but it never stopped being exhausting. Still, she reminded herself, you're not here to prove anything. But deep down, she knew she was. On Thursday, she stopped by O'Malley's again for coffee. The moment she stepped inside, the air shifted. Conversations quieted for half a beat. Eddie was there again, bragging loudly about his new workout routine. When he saw Rachel, he grinned like a cat spotting a mouse. Well, if it isn't Commander Morgan. You ready for the mud pit? Hope you brought your spa gloves. Rachel didn't rise to it. She took her coffee to go, turning for the door. But then she stopped and said, "Tell you what, Eddie, let's make it interesting." Eddie's eyebrows shot up. "Oh? If I beat you," she said evenly. "You spend a month volunteering at the Veterans Center. No excuses." Eddie laughed. "And when I win?" "You won't," Rachel said simply, and walked out. The diner erupted in laughter, but mixed with it was something else. Excitement. For the first time in years, the town had something to look forward to. That night, Rachel sat by her father's old porch, watching lightning bugs dance in the field. She could almost hear his voice gruff, patient, proud. He'd been the one who taught her to shoot, to fix engines, to stand her ground. He'd never doubted her strength, even when everyone else had. She whispered softly, "Wish you were here, Dad." In the distance, thunder rolled. The rain began to fall, washing the dust off the fields, just as she was preparing to wash the doubt off her name. The next morning, the town woke to a headline in a Whitestone Weekly. Veterans Challenge. Local Navy veteran faces off against hometown favorites. The photo beneath showed Rachel standing beside Carl, both smiling. Eddie and his friends were in another picture, flexing for the camera, their arms crossed confidently. People began to take sides. Some rooted for the hometown boys. Others quietly hoped the mysterious Commander Morgan would humble them. At the diner, the conversations turned sharper, livelier. "I hear she's legit," one man said. "Maybe," another replied, "but she's still just one person." But those who had seen Rachel train running at dawn, climbing fences, lifting logs knew there was more to her than met the eye. The night before the event, Rachel laid out her old training shirt faded, torn at the sleeve, the seal trident barely visible. She hadn't worn it in years. The fabric smelled faintly of dust and memory. She traced the emblem with her fingers and closed her eyes. She didn't need the shirt to remember who she was, but it reminded her of the price she'd paid to become her. This wasn't just a local race anymore. It was something deeper. A reminder to herself, to the town, maybe even to those boys, that respect wasn't about gender, rank, or reputation. It was about endurance. And tomorrow, she'd show them what endurance really looked like. The morning of the Veterans Challenge dawned bright and cool, the kind of Texas day that looked harmless but turned brutal fast. The field on the outskirts of Whitestone was alive with activity music blaring from speakers, tents fluttering in the breeze, and townsfolk crowding around the muddy track. The scent of wet earth, coffee, and excitement filled the air. Rachel parked her old pickup near the starting line, stepping out in a faded navy training shirt, dark running pants, and boots already caked with yesterday's dust. Her hair was tied back in a tight braid, her expression unreadable. She scanned the course. It wasn't just a race, it was a gauntlet. Rope climbs, balance beams, a tire drag, a freezing water pit, and finally, a stretch of sticky mud that swallowed people whole. To most, it was a charity obstacle course. To Rachel, it looked like a stroll compared to Bud's training. "Morning, Commander," Carl called, handing her a number tag. He grinned. "You sure you're ready for this circus?" Rachel smirked. "Born ready." Eddie and his crew arrived moments later, 5 of them, all muscle and swagger. They wore matching black shirts that read, "Whitestone Warriors." Eddie, in front, flashed his signature smirk when he saw Rachel stretching near the start line. "Well, well," he called. "Didn't think you'd actually show up." Rachel didn't even look up. "You talk a lot for someone about to lose." His friends snickered, but there was a flicker of unease in Eddie's laugh. "We'll see, Navy girl." Carl blew the whistle for warm-ups, but the air was already buzzing. People weren't here for the charity. They were here to see the showdown. As the clock ticked toward 9, the announcer grabbed the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Whitestone's annual Veterans Challenge. Today, 20 brave participants will tackle the toughest course we've ever built. Let's give them a hand." The crowd cheered. Rachel adjusted her gloves, rolling her shoulders. Around her, men were psyching themselves up, yelling, laughing, doing push-ups. Rachel just stood still, eyes half closed, steadying her breathing. She'd done this hundreds of times before missions, before chaos. The calm before the storm was her comfort zone. The whistle shrieked. And just like that, the field exploded into motion. Rachel moved quickly, efficiently, her steps deliberate. She didn't sprint out of the gate like the others. She'd learned long ago that endurance wasn't about speed. It was about rhythm. Eddie bolted ahead, mud flying off his boots, glancing back to grin at her. The first obstacle, a set of towering hay bales, slowed the pack. Rachel climbed with precise, practiced movements, vaulting over without wasting breath. Her body moved like a machine, controlled, balanced, efficient. "Come on, Grandma," one of Eddie's friends yelled back, already out of breath. Rachel didn't respond. She landed softly, hit the ground running. By the time they reached the tire drag, several of the younger competitors were gasping. The tires were heavy, slick with mud. Rachel crouched low, wrapped the rope around her waist, and began to pull. Her muscles coiled like steel cables, her movements steady. The men beside her strained and cursed. She stayed silent, her breathing slow and even. The crowd started noticing. "Who is she?" Someone whispered. "Carl says she's Navy," another replied. "Navy? She moves like special ops." Eddie, now a few yards ahead, turned to look back and nearly tripped. Rachel was gaining ground, her face calm as if she were jogging a park trail. His pride prickled. He wasn't about to be shown up by her. Not here, not in front of everyone. As they hit the cold water pit, he saw his chance. Rachel stepped into the icy trench, chest deep in freezing water. Eddie waited until she was halfway through, and accidentally splashed a wave of mud and sludge into her face. The crowd laughed, thinking it harmless fun. Rachel blinked the mud from her eyes, her expression unchanged. She didn't yell, didn't react. She just pushed forward, her movements smooth, unbothered. Carl watched from the sideline, jaw tight. He'd seen that look before years ago, on soldiers who'd seen things most couldn't imagine. By the time Rachel reached the rope climb, several men were already slowing. She wiped her hands, took one look up, and scaled it with the ease of someone who'd done it in the dark, under gunfire, with 60 pounds of gear. At the top, she paused to help a struggling participant, a young Marine veteran with a prosthetic leg. "Hook your elbow," she instructed calmly. "Use your core, not your arms." The man followed her directions and made it up. "Thanks, ma'am," he panted. "Don't call me ma'am," she said with a faint smile. "Call me Rachel." Halfway through the course, the laughter had died down. The Whitestone warriors were panting, slipping, covered in mud. Rachel, though drenched and streaked with dirt, moved with quiet precision. The spectators started clapping not for show, but out of genuine awe. "Look at her go. She's not even tired. Eddie's barely keeping up." Eddie noticed the shift. The cheers weren't for him anymore. They were for her. His jaw clenched. As they neared the last stretch, the infamous mud trench, he felt desperation rising. He couldn't let her beat him. Not a woman. Not this woman. When they both hit the edge of the pit, he glanced sideways and stumbled, shoving her shoulder hard. Rachel lost balance and fell face first into the thick mud. The crowd gasped, then laughed nervously. Eddie straightened, smirking. "Oops," he called. "Didn't see you there, Commander?" For a few seconds, Rachel didn't move. Mud dripped from her hair, her shirt, her arms. The laughter grew louder. But then, she stood, slowly, silently. Her gaze lifted to Eddie, not angry, not humiliated, but piercing. Her eyes locked on him like she was back on a mission, assessing a target. The laughter began to die out, replaced by an uneasy hush. Then she moved. Without a word, Rachel charged through the mud, arms pumping, legs slicing through the pit with controlled power. Each stride was stronger, faster, cleaner. The crowd erupted not laughter this time, but cheers. "Go, Rachel." "She's not done yet. Look at her move." She overtook Eddie within seconds, splattering him with the same mud he'd thrown at her. He tried to catch up, but his energy was gone. Rachel sprinted toward the final climb, a 20-foot rope, wall slick with rainwater, and started scaling it like it was nothing. Her boots found every grip. Her arms pulled with unwavering strength. She reached the top, paused for half a heartbeat, and looked back not to gloat, but to see who needed help. She reached down and offered her hand to the same veteran she'd guided earlier. Together, they climbed over the wall and dropped to the other side. The crowd went wild. Eddie stumbled across the finish line a full minute later, chest heaving, his pride bruised deeper than his body. Rachel, covered in mud and sweat, stood calmly by the sidelines, shaking hands with other competitors. She wasn't smiling in triumph. She didn't need to. Carl walked over, beaming. "You didn't just win," he said quietly. "You taught them something." Rachel took a sip of water, her gaze distant. "They're not bad kids," she said softly. "Just never learned what real respect looks like." From the corner of her eye, she saw Eddie looking her way, face flushed, expression conflicted. She nodded once, almost in acknowledgement, before turning to help the next finisher across the line. By noon, the event was over. Reporters from nearby towns were already gathering quotes. Photos of Rachel helping the disabled veteran were spreading online, captioned, "She didn't just win, she lifted others with her." Eddie avoided her gaze, standing apart from his friends. The cheers, the pride, it wasn't his anymore. But deep down, something inside him shifted. Because the woman he had mocked had done what no one expected. She hadn't fought for glory. She hadn't demanded attention. She had simply shown up and proved herself the quietest, toughest warrior in the field. Rachel walked back to her truck, wiping her hands clean. Carl jogged after her. "You know the town's never going to forget this, right?" Rachel chuckled. That's not why I did it. Then why? She looked toward the muddy field, where the wind rustled through the flags. Because sometimes, she said softly, you have to remind people that strength doesn't always look loud. Carl smiled. Well, Commander, you did that all right. Rachel opened her truck door, glancing once more at the cheering crowd. Then she drove off, leaving behind the noise, the mud, and the disbelief heading home to the quiet she'd earned. But she didn't realize it yet. This was only the beginning. Because by nightfall, the whole town would know exactly who she really was. The sun broke over the fields of Whitestone, spilling golden light across the rows of cars lining the dusty road. The annual Veterans Challenge had always been a proud town tradition, but this year it carried an extra spark of curiosity. Word had spread like wildfire that the quiet lady who ran morning drills at the community gym had entered the competition. Rachel Hayes stood beside her old blue pickup, rolling her shoulders as she surveyed the obstacle course ahead. Mud pits, climbing walls, rope swings, water trenches. It looked intense, but to her, it was child's play compared to what she'd been through. She wore plain athletic gear, her dark braid pulled tight, her focus sharp. There was no flash, no posing, just calm readiness. Carl wandered over, clipboard in hand. You sure about this, Commander? He teased. Rachel gave a half-smile. You've seen worse, she replied. Carl chuckled. Oh, I've seen it, sure. Doesn't mean these boys have. Try not to break too many egos today, huh? She shrugged. I'll do my best. At the starting line, Eddie and his buddies were already cracking jokes, their laughter carrying over the crowd. Eddie, tall and broad-shouldered, spotted Rachel and smirked. Well, look who decided to join the fun. Hope you don't mind a little mud, sweetheart? Rachel met his eyes with an even gaze. Mud washes off. Pride doesn't. That line hit the crowd harder than she intended. A few people chuckled. Others exchanged glances. Eddie's smirk faltered for just a heartbeat, then returned. We'll see how you feel about that when you're eating dirt. The announcer's voice boomed from the speakers. Welcome, everyone, to the 14th Annual Whitestone Veterans Challenge. Today's winner gets $2,000 toward a charity of their choice, and, of course, bragging rights for a year. The crowd roared. Rachel glanced across the course one last time, mentally mapping each obstacle, timing, angles, escape routes. She wasn't competing against anyone else. She was measuring herself, testing if the steel inside her had dulled or not. The whistle blew, and they were off. The first obstacle was a series of stacked hay bales and barrels. Eddie launched forward, bounding over them with sheer power. Rachel moved more deliberately, not fast, but smooth, her movements precise and efficient. Where others jumped wildly, she flowed through each motion, conserving energy. By the time they hit the first mud trench, several of the younger competitors were already winded. Rachel's boots hit the sludge with a heavy splash. The cold mud clung to her legs, but she pushed forward, breathing evenly. Come on, old-timer, one of Eddie's friends yelled. You slowing down already? Rachel didn't answer. She simply adjusted her grip on the rope ahead and pulled herself over the slippery wall in a single practiced motion. The crowd started to notice. Who is she? Someone whispered. Carl said she's Navy. She moves like she's done this her whole life. Eddie, a few meters ahead, looked back. His grin faltered when he saw Rachel right behind him, mud dripping but expression unchanged. He dug deeper, pushing harder, refusing to let her close the gap. Next came the tire drag. Each competitor had to haul a massive tire 20 yards across the field. Eddie yanked hard, muscles bulging. Rachel crouched low, looped the rope around her waist, and leaned into it. Her posture was perfect, Core tight, step steady. The tire slid forward smoothly, inch by inch. Her breathing never wavered. "Go, Rachel!" Someone yelled from the sidelines. Carl smirked from the judge's tent. "Told you she'd make them sweat." At the freezing water pit, Eddie saw his chance. As Rachel stepped into the icy trench, he accidentally kicked a wave of cold, muddy water right into her face. The crowd laughed. Rachel blinked, wiped her eyes, and kept moving. Not a word. Not a glare. Carl's grin faded. He knew that look, the quiet before something dangerous. Rachel climbed out of the trench, water streaming off her, and broke into a jog. The others were panting. She was steady. She passed 2 men struggling at the monkey bars, then another at the rope climb. When she reached the top, she spotted a Marine veteran below, struggling with his prosthetic leg. Without hesitation, she crouched and called down, "Hook your arm. Use your hips." He followed her instructions. She reached down, locked her hand with his, and pulled him up with surprising strength. The crowd cheered. "Thank you," he gasped. Rachel nodded. "Don't thank me. You did the work." By the halfway point, Eddie's smirk was gone. His breathing was ragged, his shirt plastered to his chest with mud and sweat. But the sound from the crowd was changing. People were cheering for her. "She's unstoppable. She hasn't slowed down once. Look at her form." Eddie's jaw clenched. This was his event, his glory. He wasn't going to let her take it. The final stretch loomed ahead, a deep mud pit followed by a steep wall climb. Eddie shot her a side glance, something bitter in his eyes. "See you in the mud," he muttered. Then, as they both leapt toward the pit, he thrust his shoulder forward, hard. Rachel went down face first. The crowd gasped. Eddie straightened, wiping mud from his arms, pretending it was an accident. "Oops," he said loudly. "Didn't see you there, Mom." A few people laughed. Most didn't. For a long moment, Rachel didn't move. Mud dripped from her face, her braid, her arms. Then, slowly, she planted her hands in the muck and pushed herself up. Her face was unreadable. But her eyes, those eyes were sharp as razors. Eddie's confidence faltered. Rachel stood straight, took one step forward, then another. The mud clung to her legs, but she moved like it was nothing, like every grain of dirt was fuel. Then she broke into a run. Every stride was a statement, every motion deliberate. The crowd erupted in cheers that drowned out everything else. "Go, Rachel. She's coming back. She's a beast." Eddie looked back just in time to see her closing in. Panic flickered across his face. He pushed harder, but his legs were heavy, clumsy. She passed him halfway through the pit, mud splattering across both of them. At the rope wall, Rachel didn't hesitate. She grabbed the slick rope, muscles flexing as she climbed. Eddie tried to follow, slipping on the wet surface. The same Marine veteran Rachel had helped earlier was right behind her. She reached back again, offered her hand, and together they scaled the final wall. The finish line waited. Rachel dropped down first, landing lightly despite the mud and exhaustion. She didn't throw her hands up or yell. She just stood there, breathing slow and steady as the crowd's cheers shook the air. Eddie stumbled across seconds later, collapsing to his knees. Carl approached Rachel, shaking his head in disbelief. "You didn't just win, Commander. You rewrote the definition of grace under fire." Rachel smiled faintly. "It's just mud, Carl." "Yeah," he said quietly, "but I've never seen anyone wear it like armor." By the time the sun began to dip, Rachel had already left the stage. She wasn't interested in medals or applause. She helped volunteers clean up the course, loading stray ropes and tires into a truck. But she didn't notice the small group of people gathering nearby, the ones scrolling through their phones, whispering, showing photos of her climbing the rope wall, pulling the Marine up, covered in mud yet composed. "She's not just Navy," one man said. "I just found her name online. Rachel Hayes. She's a retired Navy SEAL, first female in her division." The whispers spread fast. By sundown, the entire town would know. The woman they'd laughed at, shoved into the mud, wasn't just a competitor. She was a warrior, a living legend who'd fought in silence, and reminded everyone that true strength doesn't need to shout. By sundown, Whitestone was buzzing. The town hadn't seen this much talk since the county fair caught fire 5 years ago. But this time, it wasn't gossip about accidents or scandals. It was about her. The video of Rachel's fall and her rise had hit the internet faster than wildfire in dry grass. Someone from the crowd had captured every second. Eddie's shove, Rachel standing back up, and her unstoppable sprint through the mud. The title on social media read, "They laughed when she fell, then found out she was a Navy SEAL." By nightfall, the clip had been shared over 50,000 times. At a small diner near the town square, phones glowed at every table. The usual chatter about politics and football had vanished, replaced by murmurs and awe. "Did you see how she pulled that Marine up the wall? She didn't even flinch when that guy shoved her. Rachel Hayes. I just looked her up. She's got medals, real ones." The waitress, a young woman named Jenna, turned her phone toward her coworker. "Look at this, Lila. That's her. She's been training folks at the gym for months and never said a word." Lila shook her head in disbelief. And Eddie thought she was just some pushy vet trying to prove a point. Lord help him. At the other end of town, Eddie sat in his garage, staring at his phone screen. The sound of the video replayed again and again, the splash, the laughter, and her rising from the mud. Every comment under the post cut deeper than any insult he'd ever heard. That's what discipline looks like. Guy's lucky she didn't drop him in the mud permanently. Respect to the SEAL vet, legend. He tossed the phone onto the workbench, rubbing his temples. His friends had stopped messaging hours ago. The silence was worse than the mockery. His pride was gone, but something else had replaced it. Annoying guilt he couldn't shake. Meanwhile, Rachel sat on her back porch, wrapped in a light jacket, sipping black coffee. She didn't use social media much, never cared for it, but her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from people she hadn't heard from in years. Former teammates. Old commanders. Even news outlets asking for interviews. She ignored them all. The night was quiet, the air cool. Crickets hummed somewhere in the distance. This, the peace, the stillness, was what she'd earned after years of chaos. She didn't want fame. She didn't want to trend. She wanted to live. Carl's truck pulled into her driveway, headlights cutting through the dark. He climbed out holding a bag of takeout. "You planning to hide out here while the internet turns you into a hero?" he asked, grinning. Rachel sighed. "I didn't ask for this. You didn't have to. You just reminded people what real strength looks like." He handed her the bag. "And by the way, the mayor called me. Says he wants to honor you at next week's town meeting." She frowned. "Carl," he raised his hands. "Don't shoot the messenger. I told him you'd probably say no, but he insisted." Rachel leaned back in her chair. "Last time someone said honor, I ended up getting a folded flag and 3 funerals. I don't want ceremonies." Carl nodded quietly. "I get it. But this isn't the Navy. It's just a small town finally realizing they owe you some respect." The next morning, Rachel woke early as always. Dawn light streaked through her blinds as she tied her shoes and headed out for a jog. But when she stepped outside, she paused. Across the street, a young boy stood waiting. He couldn't have been more than 12. "Morning," she said cautiously. "Morning, ma'am," he replied, clutching a crumpled newspaper. "My dad showed me the video. He said you were a Navy SEAL. Is that true?" Rachel hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, a long time ago." The boy's eyes lit up. "That's awesome. I used to think heroes were in movies, but my dad said real ones don't brag. They just do what needs doing." Rachel smiled faintly. "Your dad's a smart man." He held up the newspaper. The front page showed her mid-climb, helping the Marine over the wall. The headline read, "The Muddy Miracle. Local veteran becomes national inspiration." "I'm going to write a report about you for school," the boy said proudly. Rachel chuckled. "Just remember, it's not about being tough. It's about never quitting." He nodded seriously before running off. She watched him go, a quiet warmth blooming in her chest. By afternoon, reporters started arriving. News vans lined the street, and camera crews set up near the community center. Rachel avoided them, sneaking through the back entrance to check on the gym. Inside, the usual morning crowd had doubled. People were everywhere, stretching, chatting, waiting for her. When she walked in, a hush fell. Then someone started clapping. And another. Soon the whole room erupted in applause. Rachel froze. "You don't have to do that," she said awkwardly. Carl, standing by the counter, grinned. "We don't have to. We want to." A young woman stepped forward. "I saw what they did to you. The way you handled it, ... You didn't fight back. You just proved them wrong by being better." That meant something. Rachel's throat tightened. She looked around. Faces she'd seen every day for months suddenly looked at her differently. Not with pity, not with curiosity, but with respect. She swallowed hard. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's get to work." Outside the gym, Eddie lingered by his truck. He'd spent the morning working up the courage to face her. His ego screamed at him to leave, but something deeper told him he needed to stay. When Rachel finally stepped out after the session, he took a deep breath and approached. "Hey," he started awkwardly. "Got a minute?" Rachel looked at him, unreadable. "Sure." He shifted his weight, staring at the ground. "I came to say sorry. For the way I treated you. For what I did." Rachel crossed her arms. "You embarrassed yourself, Eddie, not me." He nodded. "Yeah, I know. I thought I was being funny, showing off. But when I saw that video, it hit me. You didn't fight back. You didn't yell. You just got up. I've never seen anyone do that." She studied him for a long moment. "Apologies accepted," she said simply. "But don't say sorry to me. Learn from it." Eddie nodded again, eyes downcast. "I will. I promise." As he turned to leave, Rachel added quietly, "Next time, try helping someone up instead of pushing them down. You'll feel better about the man looking back at you." He paused, then gave a small nod before walking away. That evening, Rachel finally turned on her television. Every channel showed her face. Commentators praised her resilience. Veterans across the country were posting messages of respect. She muted the volume, staring at the screen. All she'd done was stand up. But sometimes, she realized, that's all the world needs to see. One person standing up when everyone expects them to stay down. By the end of the week, the Veterans Challenge organizers renamed the final obstacle the Hayes Wall. Not to glorify her, but to remind everyone who came after that, even when the mud tries to pull you down, you rise. 3 days after the Veterans Challenge, Rachel's quiet life had vanished. The local story had gone national. Major networks were running features titled "The Seal Who Stayed Silent" and "Strength in the Mud." People she'd never met were calling her a hero. Veterans groups invited her to speak. A senator mentioned her name during a speech about women in service. And through it all, Rachel felt exhausted. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. At the grocery store, kids asked for photos. At the diner, strangers offered to buy her meals. Even jogging at dawn had become impossible without someone stopping to thank her. But the thing about fame, especially uninvited fame, is that it digs into places you thought were buried. Rachel had built her peace carefully, layer by layer, after years of noise, chaos, and loss. Now it was cracking. Carl found her sitting behind the gym after closing, legs stretched out, bottle of water in hand. "You've been dodging interviews again," he said, dropping onto the step beside her. "I told them no. I'm not interested." He shrugged. "They're offering money, Rachel. A lot of it. You could do good things with that kind of attention." She shot him a tired look. "Carl, every time I've seen cameras in my face, it was because something went wrong. I don't need a microphone to make a difference." He leaned back against the wall. "Maybe, but you already did. People are talking about respect, resilience, veterans. You changed the tone of the whole conversation. Whether you like it or not, you've become a symbol." Rachel took a slow breath. Symbols fade. People forget. Carl smiled faintly. "Maybe, but not all of them." The next morning, she arrived at the gym early, hoping to train before anyone else showed up. But when she unlocked the door, she froze. Someone was already there. A man stood near the back, broad-shouldered, wearing a worn leather jacket and a ball cap pulled low. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and Rachel felt the air leave her chest. "Cole," she whispered. He grinned, that same crooked grin she hadn't seen in almost 10 years. "Hey, Commander." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was thick, full of unspoken memories, shared missions, and ghosts that still haunted their dreams. Cole Matthews had been part of her SEAL team. They'd served together through 2 deployments. He'd been there the night everything went wrong in Kandahar, the night they'd lost 3 of their brothers. Rachel hadn't seen him since the funeral. "What are you doing here?" she finally asked. He shrugged. "Saw you on TV. Couldn't believe it. Figured I'd come see for myself." Rachel folded her arms. "So you just drove halfway across the country to gawk?" He laughed. "No, ma'am. I came to make sure you were okay." She looked away, jaw tightening. "You don't need to check on me, Cole. I'm fine." He stepped closer, voice softer. "You always say that." They sat at one of the benches, the morning light slanting through the windows. Cole studied her quietly, the faint scar under her eye, the tension in her shoulders, the distance in her gaze. "You look good," he said. "Peace suits you." Rachel smirked. "Peace is overrated. Just quieter than gunfire." He chuckled, then his expression turned serious. "You know, the last time I saw you, you were walking away from everything. I didn't think I'd ever see you again." "I didn't plan to come back," she admitted. "But the world has a way of dragging you into things you didn't ask for." He nodded. "You handled it like you always do, calm under fire." Rachel looked down at her hands. "I didn't want this attention, Cole. I just wanted a normal life." He tilted his head. "And yet, you've always been the one who stood up when others stayed down." "Doesn't surprise me one bit." Carl walked in just then, spotting the stranger. "Friend of yours?" Rachel hesitated. "Old teammate." Cole stood and shook his hand. "Cole Matthews. Served with Rachel overseas." Carl's eyebrows rose. "So the legend's real, huh? I thought she made half that stuff up." Rachel shot him a glare. Cole laughed. "Trust me, buddy, if she told you the whole story, You wouldn't sleep for a week. Carl grinned. I like this guy. Rachel sighed. That makes one of you. As the morning crowd filtered in, Rachel tried to lose herself in the rhythm of training. But her focus kept slipping. Seeing Cole had brought everything rushing back. The firefights, the desert heat, the radio static before a mission, the sound of boots in the dust. And the faces. The ones that never made it home. By noon, she stepped outside, needing air. Cole followed quietly. You still blame yourself, he said softly. Rachel's head snapped up. For what? For that night. For losing them. Her eyes hardened. I was team lead. It was my call. It was an ambush, he countered. We all walked into it. You got half of us out alive. That's not failure, Rachel. That's survival. She looked away, her throat tight. You ever wonder if we should have stayed? Tried harder? Cole exhaled. Every day. But I also remember what you said after. We honor them by living right, not dying wrong. You taught me that. Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words settle. I forgot I said that, she murmured. That's why I came, he said quietly. To remind you. That night, Rachel finally turned on her phone again. Dozens of messages blinked on screen. Veterans thanking her. Mothers writing about their daughters. Soldiers saying her story gave them hope. One message stood out. It was from a name she hadn't seen in years. Admiral Lawson, her old commanding officer. Commander Hayes, your story reached Washington. Proud doesn't begin to cover it. I'm glad the world's finally seeing what we saw years ago. You led with strength and humility. The Navy could use more like you. If you ever feel like putting that uniform back on, the door's open. Rachel stared at the message for a long time before setting the phone down. Cole's words echoed in her head. You honor them by living right. Maybe this was her way, not with a weapon anymore, but with example. The following day, she walked into the gym with renewed focus. She gathered the regulars, plus a few newcomers who'd signed up after seeing the viral video. All right, she said, clapping her hands. We're adding something new. It's called Operation Rise, a free program for veterans and civilians to train together. No ranks, no judgment. Just effort. Carl blinked. You're serious? Rachel nodded. If the world wants to watch, let's give them something worth watching. Cole grinned. There's the commander I remember. She smirked. Don't get used to it. That night, the gym lights burned late as Rachel watched people, veterans, teenagers, even a few of Eddie's old crew, push through the new drills together. No egos, no mocking, just sweat and grit. And for the first time in years, Rachel felt something settle inside her. Not pride, not relief, peace, but in the quiet corner of her mind, one thought remained, a whisper she couldn't ignore. The past doesn't stay buried forever. And as Cole's phone buzzed quietly in his pocket, his face darkened for just a moment. He hadn't told her everything yet. It started subtly. At first, it was just small signs. A suspicious car parked near the gym for hours. A van that followed Rachel and Cole during morning drills. And phone calls with heavy breathing on the other end. Whitestone, a town where everyone knew everyone, had rarely seen tension like this. Rachel noticed it first while she was running along the edge of the community field. The sun was just rising, casting long shadows. She slowed, hand resting on the side of her face, feeling for any unusual vibrations in the air, a habit from years of missions. Something's off, she muttered to herself. Cole jogged up beside her, scanning the quiet street. I've had my eyes on that blue pickup, he said, nodding toward a dark vehicle idling down the road. Been there 3 mornings in a row. They're studying us. Rachel clenched her fists. I thought this was supposed to be a safe town. It is, Cole said. Safe until people from our past decide it isn't. By mid-morning, the first signs of panic arrived in person. Eddie, humbled and still nursing his bruised ego from the Veterans Challenge, approached the gym. You need to see this, he said, breathless, motioning for her and Cole to step outside. A small crowd had gathered near the edge of town. Residents whispered anxiously as a delivery truck, one of the suspicious vehicles Rachel had noticed earlier, was surrounded by police. Its contents had been tampered with. Old intelligence documents, unmarked electronics, and several tools capable of causing serious harm if mishandled. Rachel's jaw tightened. She recognized some of the markings immediately, not just random criminals. This was professional, methodical, dangerous. Cole stood beside her. They've traced some of your old operations. Looks like someone's trying to rebuild old networks, using intelligence you were involved in years ago. Rachel swallowed. She'd hoped her past would never touch this quiet town. But now, her instincts screamed that it had already arrived. The mayor called an emergency town meeting that afternoon. The entire community packed into the hall, buzzing with tension and fear. Rachel and Cole stood quietly at the back, observing. Folks, the mayor began, voice tense. We've had an incident that requires caution. There's a threat in our area, nothing confirmed yet, but it's connected to past military operations, not local criminal activity. For safety, please remain vigilant. The crowd murmured. Some shook their heads. A few whispered nervously about Rachel, the seal woman, who had recently become a local celebrity. Rachel stepped forward. Her presence demanded attention without a word. This is real, she said calmly, scanning the faces of the townspeople. But panicking won't help anyone. We need to stay aware, stay prepared, and follow instructions. I've handled threats far bigger than this, and with your cooperation, we'll get through it safely. Her voice was steady, commanding, even in mud. She had led, and now, in the town hall, she was doing it again. The crowd quieted. People nodded. The fear didn't vanish, but Rachel's presence turned it into something manageable. Purpose. That evening, Rachel and Cole coordinated with local law enforcement. Plans were drawn, routes mapped, contingency protocols established. They trained volunteers from the town, including Eddie and a handful of young men and women who had seen Rachel's strength at the Veterans Challenge. Focus on perimeter security, Rachel instructed. Watch for unusual activity. Keep your phones charged and stay in constant communication. Cole added, and remember, we're not looking for a fight unless we have to. Observation and reporting are our priorities. Rachel nodded. Correct. Precision, patience, and control. Everything else comes second. The first night of surveillance was tense. Rachel patrolled the edge of town, flashlight in hand, scanning shadows. Every rustle in the bushes made her muscles tense, ready for action. Her heart beat with the rhythm she had trained for years. Cole appeared beside her, quietly taking in the scene. You've aged well in peace, he said. Still the calmest person in the chaos. Rachel didn't respond immediately. Her gaze was fixed on a distant, dark shape, a figure moving silently between buildings. Not yet, she muttered. Let's see what they're planning. The figure paused, then disappeared. Rachel exhaled slowly, lowering her flashlight. They're testing, she said. Probing. Seeing what we're capable of. Cole nodded. We'll be ready. Over the next few days, small attempts escalated. Devices were found near key town locations. Surveillance vans appeared and disappeared, and messages were intercepted, coded, threatening. But Rachel and Cole were always one step ahead. Every alert, every small encounter, strengthened the community's resolve. Residents who had once mocked her now watched her with awe. Eddie approached Rachel one afternoon, eyes wide. "I never thought I'd see a woman in mud teach a whole town how to defend themselves." I owe you, Commander." Rachel shook her head. "Not owed. You stood up when it mattered. That counts more than anything." The townspeople began helping too. Farmers offered safe locations, shopkeepers volunteered equipment, and neighbors checked in on each other. Rachel's influence had transformed fear into action, and the town, once ordinary, now had a quiet strength of its own. The climax came one stormy night. Rain pelted rooftops, thunder rolled across the hills, and a shadowy group attempted to breach the perimeter. Rachel, Cole, and a team of trained volunteers were ready. Every movement was precise. Every command executed calmly. The intruders were met with organized resistance, caught in the crossfire of strategic lighting, carefully coordinated alarms, and Rachel's commanding presence. Within minutes, the threat was neutralized, captured by both law enforcement and the town's volunteers. Rachel stood in the mud, rain dripping down her face. Her uniform may have been civilian now, but every muscle, every instinct, every decision screamed experience. The town had witnessed it all. No longer was she the mud girl from the challenge. She was a protector, a veteran, a true leader. Cole came to her side. "They won't forget this," he said quietly. Rachel shook her head, letting the rain wash over her. "Neither will I," she replied. The next morning, the town of Whitestone gathered to thank her. Flags waved, children cheered, and even Eddie stood with humility and respect. "You didn't just win in the mud," the mayor said, placing a small medal around her neck. "You protected us when we couldn't protect ourselves. We owe you more than words can say." Rachel accepted it silently, thinking of the team she had lost, the missions she had survived, and the quiet discipline that had brought her here. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to smile. Not for fame, not for glory, but for the people she had saved. Whitestone had finally learned what real courage looked like. And Rachel Hayes, battle-hardened, unyielding, and silent in her strength, had become their hero in every sense of the word. The sun rose over Whitestone, casting warm light across a town that felt different. There was a sense of pride in the air, mingled with relief. People spoke softly, sharing stories of the stormy night when danger had come to their doorstep and the woman who had led them through it. Rachel Hayes walked along Main Street, her boots quiet on the wet pavement. Her braid was damp from the morning drizzle, her eyes sharp but calm. She was no longer just the mysterious trainer at the gym, the woman who ran morning drills and disappeared. She was a living testament to courage, discipline, and unshakable resilience. At the corner cafe, locals waved. Some brought small gifts, homemade pies, cards, a knitted scarf. Rachel accepted them with a gentle nod. No words, just acknowledgement. Her presence spoke louder than any speech could. Eddie approached her cautiously, holding a coffee in one hand and his hat in the other. He hadn't spoken much since the storm, but Rachel could see the shift in him, from arrogance to humility. "You know," he began, voice hesitant, "I thought I understood strength. Thought it was all about muscles, speed, showing off." He swallowed. "I was wrong. You taught me it's about heart, discipline, and standing when others fall." Rachel studied him, expression unreadable. "It's not about lessons. It's about choices. You can choose to rise or stay down." He nodded. "I want to rise. Thank you for showing me how." For the first time, he met her gaze fully, without fear or mockery. She nodded subtly, a quiet acknowledgement of his growth. Across town, the mayor and council had organized a community ceremony. The field where the Veterans Challenge had been held was decorated with banners, flags, and flowers. Children ran through the grass, laughing. Families lined the edges, eager to witness the moment when Rachel's story would finally be honored in full. Carl nudged her lightly. "Ready for the crowd?" Rachel glanced at him. "Doesn't matter. I'm ready for them." The mayor stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Today, we honor not just a hero of our town, but a hero in every sense of the word. Someone who stood tall when others would have faltered. Someone who reminded us all what it means to be brave, selfless, and disciplined." He paused and gestured to Rachel. "Ladies and gentlemen, Commander Rachel Hayes." The applause was deafening. Not loud, showy clapping, but deep, heartfelt admiration. The townspeople who had once laughed, who had shoved her into mud, who had doubted her, all now witnessed her standing tall. Rachel stepped forward, raincoat in hand, mud-streaked boots beneath her. She didn't speak immediately. She let the silence carry her presence, the weight of her history, the calm authority she exuded. Finally, she said, voice steady, "I didn't come here to be a hero. I came here to live, to help where I could, to honor those who couldn't be here themselves. Bravery isn't about recognition. It's about standing when it counts, even when no one is watching." The crowd was silent, then erupted in cheers and applause. Many wiped tears from their eyes. Veterans saluted her. Children looked up in awe. Even Eddie, standing to the side, looked humbled. As the ceremony continued, Rachel moved through the crowd quietly, shaking hands, nodding at familiar faces, acknowledging those who had contributed to the town's safety during the recent threats. Cole approached her, arms folded, a faint smile on his face. "You know, I think Whitestone finally understands what we've always known. You're not just a SEAL, you're a leader, no matter the battlefield." Rachel allowed herself a small smile. "It helps to have good people beside you." Cole nodded, glancing at the volunteers and townspeople now helping each other, cleaning the field, returning flags to their poles, securing equipment. The community had transformed under her influence, stronger, more resilient, united. By evening, the field was quiet. Rachel stood alone for a moment, looking at the sunset. Mud-stained boots, tired muscles, and faint scars told the story of her journey, from the quiet drills in the gym to the national attention and the defense of her town. She thought of the team she had lost, of the missions that had haunted her dreams, and of the life she had rebuilt. Whitestone had given her a new purpose, one she hadn't expected, but one she had earned. Eddie approached one last time, holding a small framed photograph. "I made this," he said. "It's from the challenge, the moment you pulled the Marine up the wall. Thought you should have something to remember it by." Rachel took it, studying the photo. The mud, the determination in her eyes, the strength in her posture. It captured more than a moment. It captured a lesson, resilience, courage, and honor. She nodded. "Thank you, Eddie. It means more than you know." Night fell over Whitestone, calm and peaceful. The streets were quiet, and the stars reflected off puddles left from the rain. Rachel walked home, footsteps light, mind finally at ease. She knew her past would never fully leave her. The Navy, the missions, the battles lost and won, they were part of her. But so was this town, these people, and the life she had carved out. She had faced mud, ridicule, threats, and shadows. She had stood tall. And now the town, the people who once mocked her, had witnessed her true strength. Whitestone would remember. And Rachel Hayes, battle-hardened, silent, unstoppable, would continue to lead, teach, and inspire, proving that courage is not always loud, but it is always seen by those who matter. The next morning, the town's newspaper ran the headline, "From Mud to Hero. Rachel Hayes leads Whitestone to courage." Beneath the headline was a photo of her, mid-stride, mud-stained and determined, helping a fellow veteran up a wall, the very moment that had made her famous. And as Rachel glanced at the page, she smiled softly. Fame wasn't the goal. Survival wasn't the reward. The real victory was the lesson she had left behind. True strength is quiet, steadfast, and never broken. Whitestone had learned it, and Rachel Hayes had proven it once and for all.